So back to the second part of lesson 16. I will share quickly the screen with you, portion of the screen. Here we are. This is now the chapter as I prepared it. Sorry, I was dealing with a file and I just became aware to after. So you see, this is this is the file how I prepared it. Okay. Well, we finished all this. So we were here. Intentionally, knowingly sinning. For if the soul desired any imperfection that God wills not, there would not be made one will of God. I think we read all this. Yeah, here. I say knowingly, no, it must not intentionally, unknowingly consent with the will to imperfections. So I say knowingly because unintentionally and unknowingly, or without having the power to do otherwise, it may well fall into imperfections and venial sins and into the natural desires whereof we have spoken. You see, natural desires. It's very interesting. It's a very balanced point of view about the human being and spiritual life. Otherwise, we sort of imagine spiritual life or perfection, better said, in a way that has nothing to do with reality. I think this distinction is fundamental. We are all called to become holy. We are all, we need to work on it. The church says we all of us need to work on becoming holy or being united with God. Well, but we need to understand what is holiness, what will happen when what is supposed to happen, how will we be after. So I think that this distinction between what depends on not what is unintentional and unknown to us, doing something without knowing, sheds a very interesting light on perfection. For of such sins as these, which are not voluntary and surreptitious, it is written that the just man shall fall 7 times in the day and shall rise up again. Some people say, okay, well, a person united with God will continue to sin, will continue to fall. It's a delicate question, but it's a very important question. I was asked this question yesterday. Are there some things to be still to be purified? And this is a big debate. The core of the human being, which touches the voluntary aspect, has to be purified, says John of the Cross. But the weaknesses and errors, Saint Theresa of the Child Jesus in French will say the faute. The faute is like an error. It's not sin. Sin is péché. Venial sin or grave sin or mortal sin is péché in French. Well, she uses a different word. She talks about falling or wetting her wings, if you want, if she's like comparing herself to a little bird. And when she talks about all this, she's already united to God. So it's very interesting that she allows these sort of imperfections to happen, or these errors, or these escaping from God. But is she pure? Yes, she is pure. According to John of the Cross, the core of her being is pure and is constantly purified. She says it herself, constantly purified. Now you have people who will add things and say, yeah, but she said also this and that. I think it's important to understand what is the core and how the core is transformed by God, how it is necessary according to the analysis and description of John of the Cross for it to be changed, and how other things could happen, but it doesn't touch the core of the human being. So it's very important to understand what we mean by purity, purification, imperfection, sin. Is there still a purification after union, yes or no? John of the Cross would say no.
Jean,
because he's talking about the core aspect, not about these unintentionally and unknowingly made acts. Okay, now, but of the voluntary desires, which though they be for very small things, you see, merciless, no, very small things are, as I have said, intentional venial sins. Any one that is not conquered suffices to impede union. You see, so that's shocking. No, when you see, you read it, it's like you say, who can escape from that? Who can be then transformed? Who can then have this perfection?
Jean,
Yes,
can I interrupt and ask a quick question?
of course, all the questions you want.
Could you give us an example of both, something very small that would be an intentional venial sin and one that you could still have after union, so to speak?
Before union, as you see, we
Well,
come
yeah,
back to the
Theresa
case.
of Avila. Yes, sorry, yes.
Say again.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Before union, let us come back to our example, our case study, Theresa of Avila. It is an imperfection, but it slips through the fingers of a majority of the priests she met. Nobody stopped and said, no, what you're doing there, that's not correct. Because she was very probably obedient, in obedience. She wasn't like doing things out of obedience to her superior or to her rule. Of course, her rule wasn't strict. So it is very light, but still, her entire spiritual life depended on that. And she will stress a lot on it, and she will say how we need to be determined to offer ourselves, to offer all our heart, all our emotions to the Lord. Am I answering this
Yes.
half of the
Yes.
okay? Now, what could be the weaknesses that could continue after union with God? It is true that Saint Therese doesn't give an example, but she says that sometimes she could be attracted by the creatures. She never described how. Can we then, I don't know, she was suddenly very interested by a case in the news of a conversion of a very important person, a lady, and this person converted to Catholicism, or coming back to Catholicism, became very known in France, etc., and wrote many things and gave talks here and there. And then suddenly it appeared that all this was a fake. It was a man, not a woman, and it was all fake. And Therese was shocked. And Therese, in the beginning, was extremely involved in it. And this happened in a period after what I think reasonably could be considered after union, her union with the Lord. Is this an error? It's difficult to say.
No, but I see what you're trying to say.
She does recognize weakness, and she says that it continues after union, and she says that even it increases, the perception of our own weakness increases, she says, and John of the Cross says it in his way. Now, so this is one point, but weakness, we rely more on God than on ourselves. Now, would she ever willingly and knowingly do something against the will of God? I doubt. but she still acknowledges the fact that she can fall. She never explained it, but she added something very important. It might shock you or others. She said, and this is toward the end of her book, the story of the soul. She says that even if she had in her conscience or on her conscience all the sins, the gravest sins that could be committed, she will nonetheless have that immense trust in the mercy of God and go and throw herself in the arms of God. You might say, well, that's easily said because of where she was and in spiritually, you know, the closeness to God, etc. But she said it's not because I am who I am that I trust God. I will continue to trust God in any case. So this means what? She didn't exclude sin and grave sin. She's not saying that she sinned, but she's not excluding grave sin. So that's shocking, but it's there. So what could be the errors? What could be the things? Maybe a movement of, you know, the temperament of people. Some people can be very vivacious, very energetic in their way of doing things, and they could maybe hurt others, but they bounce better. They would immediately ask for forgiveness and say sorry, etc., in a very sweet and gentle way. Without mentioning certain names, but I know people who lived with today a saint. And I remember very well them saying, no, he will never be a saint. Why? They said, this is before the beatification. They said no, before they even knew that he might be beatified. The process was there, but they always thought that it wasn't possible. They said because he was very hurtful, he was very abrupt, sometimes in his way of doing certain things. So if we consider that this behavior came from him or her at a point where they were already united with God, it could be considered as something that is not voluntary. It comes from how the person is made in a way, and but does this mean that the person is lacking humility or is lacking the capacity to say sorry immediately and to be very mortified and humbled by what they did? You see, that's the balance. So you might carry with you also weaknesses of all sorts, but where lies perfection? That's the question. Where lies perfection? Is it in an aesthetical Greek statue, perfect Greek statue, or in a bumpy temperament or bumpy person, but paradoxically saint? When St. Paul says to the Lord, I prayed the Lord 3 times to remove that thorn that I have in my thigh, he never explained what it is. The Lord's answer was, no, I will not remove it, because my grace, my power dwells better in your weakness, you see. So sometimes even these weaknesses keep the person humble and maintain this person in the right attitude also. It is a complex issue, I have to say. You have the temperament of the person. You have to take into consideration the non-voluntary and non-knowingly doing certain things. And sometimes I used to say it, no, saints sometimes persecute saints. No, 2 saints living together in one place, in one community, they are capable of making the life of the other one very hard. And in the eyes of God, they might be, both of them, perfectly saints, perfectly united to him. So you will ask, well, how come? It's not done intentionally. It's just because we are human. As St. Theresa of the Child Jesus used to say, Us on earth, we don't know how to deal with our daily things. We are really, we don't have that elegance and smoothness and sleekness of dealing with our daily things. We always bump into each other. This is why I'm deeply convinced that saints are capable of making other saints' life very, very hard, and vice versa. And the paradox is that in the end, they both are saints, and they were even more sanctified by the patience, which is the highest form of love. And this is what God wants. God wants to see that patience, that love, because this is perfection. It's not doing this or not doing that. I think it's something deeper and comes from a greater abundance of love. But this takes some time to arrive. There is some work before. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't think I answered the second part, but if I have some
No,
thought,
I
I will.
saw what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay, but be careful. There is some explanation coming right now. So brace.
I was going to
Now,
ask something, Sean. Should
yes,
I
please.
wait till?
Yeah, go ahead, Blessing.
In terms of Saint Theresa of Avila, where you said that she was still living within obedience, yet because of something interior within her in the way she carried out her duties, there was sin.
I haven't pronounced the word sin.
Okay, sorry. There was imperfection, or
yeah, I would prefer imperfection. Yeah, because sin, she wouldn't sin.
Okay.
Knowingly, because sin requires knowledge and will.
Okay. By the way she carried out her duties, there was imperfection. I'm just trying to more deeply enter into what could have been her state of heart or state of mind that actually produced that imperfection. Would it have been because of her objectives? Her objectives were not wholly with the Lord, or could it have been that it was just she was doing things out of personal gratification? I'm just trying to understand it more so that I can.
An attachment to the person, an emotional attachment to the person, to make it very simple.
Okay.
She had this emotional attachment to the person she was seeing, maybe one or two more than the others. And then going to see this person, of course, gives you a lot of satisfaction. But the paradox is that you are saying to yourself that this is spiritual, while in fact it's myself. I'm looking for myself. I'm searching for myself. I'm pleasing myself in doing that, which she didn't want to see or accept for a long time, until she had that priest who spotted it and sort of blamed them very strongly, and then she started then to see it and change. And she mentions all that, so it's not us. Be careful, huh? The story is told by her, nobody else is telling the story. So it's very interesting because it's an introspection and going back to how she was behaving. But I do insist, this is me talking, of course, not her. I do insist on preferring not to use the word sin, because sin requires a bit of more of a commitment. In my humble view, it's my position today.
All right, thank you.
Okay. You will see, this is why I use her as a case study. You will see that when you continue to read this chapter, maybe we won't be able to finish it in this lesson. We will continue in the next one. But if you read the entire chapter 11, you will sense almost like he's talking about people he knew. And I'm underlining also some moments of emotional moments in his description. This is why I needed my text colored, as you can see it right now, rather than the previous one, which is why we cut I had to stop. Okay, so shall we continue? Because you will see he will answer many of your questions. So where were we? But of the voluntary, I think we read that one. I mean, if this habit be not mortified, this habit, you know, we're doing something. She was seeing this person. No, it wasn't mortified. This desire, this attachment to this person, this sort of emotional, this pleasure, no, to find this person, this friendship, no. For sometimes certain acts of different desires have not as much power when the habits are mortified. So if the habit is mortified and she did one time one thing, that's different. But here she had a habit. Still, the soul will attain to the stage of not having even these, for they likewise proceed from a habit of imperfection. But some habits of voluntary imperfections, which are never completely conquered by the determination, by the will, with the grace of God, but by determination, prevent not only the attainment of divine union, but also progress in perfection. This is very important. You see, first time here, we have some indication from John of the Cross on a question that haunts us all the time. We want to know, we want to understand. Prevent or hinder, hindrance being a hindrance to the progress in perfection. In perfection, you see, progress in perfection. So what he's addressing here is fundamental for growth, for spiritual growth. We go back to St. Theresa of Avila, it is very clear. She started to grow exponentially when she understood the imperfections and she conquered them. By the grace of God, she has the grace. This is the general help of the grace of God. She listened to the priest who said, no, you shouldn't be doing this, and you should rather do this, this, and that. Prayer of the heart alone, without this determination, which you can find in Lectio Divina, if we do it well, you will find then, you will really be ready to receive the graces of God. And from that moment, when she chooses and understands, her spiritual life, the graces she will receive will shoot up, will take off like an airplane. You see, that's very important. So you see here, 20 years of delay, 20 years of going in circles, back and forth, 20 years of not progressing properly, not knowing how to progress. You remember a few years ago, I gave a course, I think in 3 days, called Ensuring Steady Growth. Ensuring steady growth. This notion of understanding steady growth and the other notion linked to it of ensuring that steady growth is fundamental and unfortunately very rarely addressed in the books of spiritual life. It is addressed by certain saints, by certain doctors of the church, but it is very rarely addressed by, I would say, our daily books, because, and paradoxically, this is what we need. So you see here, we should pay a lot of attention to a sentence like this one. Some habits of voluntary imperfection. Remember St. Theresa of Avila, no? She keeps seeing this person. She is attached emotionally to this person. There are no sins, I can guarantee you. She didn't do anything wrong. But inside of her heart, which nobody can see, nobody can see. You can guess, but you can't see. She had that, she liked to have spent that time with the person. Was it the will of God? No. So she was going a little bit astray. No sin, no venial sin, no mortal sin, imperfection. This is why her book will be called, her major book, in my eyes, it's not the interior castle. In my eyes, her major book is rather Way of Perfection. Why? Because she gives us the formula of ensuring steady growth. And without that formula, you can have the splendid book of the interior castle describing all the different stages and also what we are supposed to do, but we will miss that power that we find in the way of perfection. Okay, what it's at stake in her case is progress in perfection. The subject of the first book of the Ascent of Mount Carmel is to almost, I would say, trigger the showering of the graces of God, the graces that God wants to give us. But he doesn't do it because we are not there to receive it. We are not doing what we are supposed to do. This is why Theresa of Avila, as a case study here, and her conversion more precisely, is of absolute importance, strategic importance for the church in the past, in the present, and in the future. So I think that this chapter with Theresa of Avila, they sort of go hand in hand. So let us repeat this last sentence and continue. But some habits of voluntary imperfection, which are never completely conquered. She never really wanted that or chose that at that time. After, yes, she did. Prevent not only the attainment of divine union, which is something very far from us. It's very advanced stage, divine union, spiritual marriage. It's very, something very advanced. No, he talks about something in the beginning. Fourth mentions, fifth mentions. Progress imperfection. I will not grow. I will go back and forth. This is what she does. During 20 years, she receives graces typical of the fourth mentions. This is absolutely sure. She receives graces, supernatural graces of God, prayer of quiet. But she comes back. She comes back to the third mentions, you see. Why? Because you don't have this complete determination. These habitual imperfections are, for example, so you see, you ask the question, like what? Here are some examples. A common custom of much speaking. Theresa of Avila. This is why you think automatically to Theresa of Avila. Much speaking. She was talking to this gentleman or these gentlemen. Or some slight attachment. It's a slight attachment, which we never quite wish to conquer. Where is the key word here in this entire second part of the sentence? Is wish. We don't wish to conquer. It's not about conquering. It's not about never or attachment or slight. No, it's about wish. Do I really want? No, I'm not interested. It's not appearing in my visual horizon. Okay. Such as that to a person. So we are talking here about what? Slight attachment. You are asking examples. Give me some examples. People who are listening to us, they want examples. Slight attachment. So the notion of attachment, and you will notice that Theresa of Avila builds the way of perfection with three virtues to practice imperfection with perfection: humility, detachment, and love. Love, like mutual love in the community, loving each other. You see. So you see, detachment is there, and he's talking about attachment. So detachment, attachment of what? How can we understand attachment? Attachment to a person, to a garment, to a book, a spiritual book, of course, a spiritual garment, of course, a rosary, no? A certain type of rosary, I don't know. He describes this after in Dark Night, book 1. A cell. Of course, here we are talking about monks and nuns, so they live in a cell. Their room is called a cell. A particular kind of food, tittle-tattle, fancies for tasting, knowing or hearing certain things, and such like. Thank you, John of the Cross. He answered a little bit the question. Like what? Any of these imperfections, if the soul has become attached and habituated to it, is of great harm to its growth and progress in virtue. Key expressions here. It will be repeated again below. So this is the second time. Here he mentions prevent progress imperfection. First time he mentions the notion of progress imperfection, like growing. And here, the second time he mentions it, great harm to its growth and progress in virtue, as though it were to fall daily into many other imperfections and usual venial sins, which proceed not from a habitual indulgence in any habitual and harmful attachment, and will not hinder it so much as when it has attachment to anything. For as long as it has this, there is no possibility that it will make progress in perfection. I hope I imagine you agree that you will never read a book written today by one of our contemporaries, people who are living today, who would state something like that. People will shoot the guy, no? Who will write something like that. Why? Because it's not acceptable. It's politically incorrect. It's like, how can you say that? Who are you to say that? You see, he is John of the Cross. As long as it has this, there is this being this slight attachment, there is no possibility. It's terrible, no? But when you remember Theresa of Avila, I think it puts things into perspective. You say, okay, now I see, I understand how we can apply that, how we can see it happening. And it did happen in her case, 20 years. She lost 20 years of her religious life, and God used her life to send us this essential message. I repeat again what I said.
Jean, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Sorry. You know, these habitual imperfections that he's speaking of, can we see them as being revealed to us through Lectio Divina?
Of course,
they're so slight, it could be that we don't see them.
No, Lectio Divina would reveal them. Because Lectio Divina, in order for it to work, sorry, this question, of course, is out of the context of John of the Cross, but it's a totally valid question, especially in the context of the School of Mary, where we understand the practice of virtue as implemented in a very good way, in a perfect way, in a proper Lectio Divina. In order to have Lectio Divina, what are the requirements? It's that determination that he is talking about. Determination of my will to choose God's will. That's the condition for Lectio Divina to happen. If I don't have that, he will not talk to me. You see, he will not reveal to me what is not working properly. So, sorry?
No, so I'm thinking, I mean, just because I like a certain rosary, it doesn't mean I don't have to ever use it again and use something I don't like. It's more when I feel that there's or I hear through the Lectio that this is an attachment that's too great.
Yes, but of course, he comes to in my conscience and says, okay, are you ready to offer this rosary to somebody else? But it will be what? It is not the produce of my mind. It will be the produce of a supernatural action coming from the Lord.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Seeing my sincerity and seeing that I am really attached, then he will ask me for that sacrifice, or for that effort, for that choice. So he will say, okay, since you really love me, I think that there is an attachment here, and I'm asking you to offer it to me and to free yourself. You see, of course, Lectio Divina, if it's done properly, and I understand that it's a great challenge, Lectio Divina. Now, another question, since we are at it. Would a spiritual director spot certain things? Yes and no. If the person doesn't open himself or herself totally with certain details, the spiritual director don't expect the spiritual director to receive inspiration from God saying, oh, be careful, this person is hiding this and that. Not in a million years. That's not how it works. God will inspire the spiritual direction, but providing that the person is totally open and telling the truth. This is why the ancient the ancient conditions declared by the desert fathers, the great first masters of spiritual life in Egypt and Palestine. They always consider that revealing the thoughts, you see, to which extent the sharing of our state goes, revealing of thoughts, which is like, I have strange thoughts that come in my mind, the temptations, etc. Do I have to reveal all that? Revealing the thoughts traditionally is considered as the condition, like for spiritual direction to work. Then God, yes, can inspire the spiritual director. But if I don't do my part, God will not do his part. The spiritual director won't be able to do his part properly. So we shouldn't then blame the spiritual director or the accompaniment, spiritual accompaniment. So this is me talking here, as we do it for the condition for the confession here. This is the sacrament. No, it's not spiritual direction. It's not a sacrament. But for confession to work, contrition is necessary. Not perfect, but at least minimum of contrition is necessary. Revealing the sin, and then, of course, the judgment of the priest, the absolution of the priest, and the penance. All these together allow the sacrament to work properly. You see, allow the grace of God to work properly. We're not puppets in confession. And for spiritual direction, there are conditions rarely mentioned. Unfortunately, today we live in a funny world where we sort of diluted everything. Spiritual direction would naturally require this, and of course, it's a greater act of humility, because if confession, if in confession one is supposed to reveal his or her own sins, and that's it, and nothing else. In spiritual direction, I think, this is me talking here also, I think one goes even deeper, in a sense that you go wider and even talk about things that you are not convinced that they are sins, but they're bothering you. In confession is not a spiritual direction, you see. So there is a triggering of the grace of God in spiritual direction that requires something. So Lectio Divina should reveal it. Spiritual direction could very well reveal it, but providing the conditions here and the conditions there. You see, I'm just trying to answer the question, because we want to know, no? Am I falling into that or not? Am I attached, yes or not? You see, and be careful, again, as I said, this chapter 11, it could become, for certain people, a very dangerous chapter. Why? Because without discernment and with a certain type of temperament, like tendencies to scruple, or tendencies to sort of, scruple, which means like questioning myself, have I really done it here very well? And then you come back again and have I really done it properly? No, it's like an ADHD sort of type of personality, no? And then if you are fed with such information of this chapter, you become crazy. It is a very harming tool, I think, and I need to repeat it. I said it in the beginning of this lesson, and I repeat it now. Ascent of Mount Carmel and chapters like these in Ascent of Mount Carmel can become extremely harmful, and in any way, for certain people, they are automatically rejected. Not you guys, but I'm talking about other people. If they read this is politically incorrect. You will never find a book saying these things today. Impossible. I don't think so. Because this requires, it's not a matter of courage. It's a matter of understanding, a deep understanding of how things work. And you say, no, it cannot work. I'm sorry. It's not a lack of humility from John of the Cross. It's not an abuse of authority from the side of John of the Cross. It's not just questions of language that he's using, and today we're using a different language. I don't think so. I think his explanation is very clear, and the case study we are using, which is Theresa of Avila, are very clear. Okay, now have we crossed a little bit the hour? I think yes. So I think we should stop here, even though there are, I mean, this chapter is amazing. I think it's an important chapter for all of us. So yeah, shall we stop here, and then so we have the two parts of the video, the first part and this second part, and then we will see for the next one. So thank you very much for your patience. Please do read carefully John of the Cross, and how can I put it? Yeah, try to understand, try to use the explanation in a wise way. Otherwise, you might harm yourself. And please seek advice. Don't just walk alone in spiritual life. That's not good. It's very dangerous to just say, "Oh, I know where to go and how to go." That's very bad. And try not to do that. Seek advice, and seek advice, as Theresa of Avila would say, to people who really understand. I mean, she suffered because of that. So let us entrust all of us to the Lord, and trust all the people, the seekers, the people who are searching for progress in love, progress in perfection, people who seek union with God. Let us pray for mutually to each other, pray for each other, and entrust ourselves to the Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you very much for your patience.